Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarinu, and today I have the pleasure to have a very special guest from Washington, D.C., Dr. Mihaela Ulieru. Welcome, Mihaela.
Thank you, Effie. I'm quite excited to be here.
I'm very excited to finally connect, even though we were both in Davos. We didn't find the time to talk extensively. We just met at different events. So, I'm very excited every time I meet you because you're really an inspiration. You're one of those rare academics, illustrious academics who are a leader in innovation and in many areas, not just from the technological point of view, but also from all the other aspects that are equally important. And I'll start by briefly mentioning a couple of your titles and where you're involved for our audience. And of course, I'll be sharing your bio and your links. Most importantly, you are the founder and the president of Impact Institute, which is all about innovation management and policy. I understand managing policy with governments in this digital age of the fourth industrial revolution, right? And you're involved in several other amazing initiatives like the Consilience Project. You're an advisor to SingularityNet. With your PhD in robotics, I can't spend another half hour talking about all the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, I think we better discuss more interesting things. And I know I have to give it back to you, Effie, that I'm always excited to talk to you and also to listen to your podcast because you bring very interesting issues. You put the spotlight always on very interesting topics, and you also drill in. So you ask challenging questions. So now, with this introduction which you made for me, I'm like, I will definitely disappoint your audience because I know you will challenge me with questions, and I have to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'll do my best.
Well, I mean, look, I want to start with something that's quite center stage in financial services and in Fintech, in the innovation and the transformation of financial services, which is all about platforms. We are kind of obsessed with the business model. We admire, and I guess even the markets, investors, private and in the public markets, capital flows are all going towards businesses in financial services that are either platforms or are making it towards that direction. I mean, in Asia, we are celebrating the most innovative business model, the super app, that is a specific kind of platform. And it's all about, the network effects and the unit economics, the low unit economics of platforms. But I want to ask you, because you bring a different perspective to this when you talk about platforms. You discuss about platforms as enablers for holistic decision making. So can you tell us about that? Because it's a different perspective, and how can we think about it in financial services or in generally?
Yes, and yes, I agree with you. And I would like, after I answer your question about this is holistic decision making, of course, what is happening today with platforms, especially social networking platforms, we are like puppets in those platforms and to enrich the platform's owners. So the wealth created doesn't go to the people. But anyway, that is a side conversation. So I will address first. If because I'm preparing a keynote, and I think I have some slides to which I can share. Would you allow me to do that,
Please,
Effie?
please.
Because an image is more than 1,000 words, and this is not an easy question. And I want also to show some examples of how I use this.
Excellent. Please be my guest.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So when we talk about holistic thinking, this is not a new way of thinking. I have with me this book which is called Holism and Evolution, and it was written by Smuts and published in 1926. Of course, there's a lot of work on this. However, our education system doesn't train us to think like that, to think holistically. It just trains us to think disciplinary and linear, and therefore we reached a point where we cannot cope anymore with what's going on in the world. So I'm going to explain to you what holistic thinking means, which is actually also called systemic thinking, systems of systems thinking, and then how can we use platforms to actually diagnose systems of systems, which is also called complexity science, which became like a syndrome of science. Nobody wants to have that in their universities. Everybody wants to have departments which are separate and competing with each other on funding versus having this interrelated collaboration that can actually conquer the whole and the big problems which you are facing. So if we look at the world, yes, as a system of systems in which the subsystems are the countries, okay, we have countries, but in each country, we have these three levels of organization. So we have the infrastructure, which consists of energy, transportation, and so on. Then we have the core structure, which you referred to, which is the economy, yes, and the financial system is money drives the economy, and vice versa. And on top of this, we have the so-called superstructure, which is the politics and the culture. But the politics is very intertwined with the economy, and actually, obviously, the economy runs on the tech stack, which is the infrastructure. So these are all interrelated. So if we are to look at, these are all networks. The infrastructure, yes, consists of all these gas networks, water networks, telecommunication. And now the internet is controlling all of them. And this is another network which is controlling this network of network infrastructures. Then we have the humans, yes. So we have here the infrastructure, we have the internet, which is controlled everything. We have people who self-organize on those platforms, which you mentioned before, the social networks and so on, or the economies which are extracting from information from those. And then the governments, which are actually determined by the culture. So if I live in a us versus them culture or us versus nature culture, I'm going to elect a government which is going to feed my needs or my wants. But if I live into a collaborative culture, then I'm going to elect a government that is going to spend the money and collect the taxes and put them in the service of people, of nature, and other purposes that are going to create a fulfilling life. So the idea here, and we're talking about platforms and holistic decision making, is that all these, what I showed you so far, are networks of complex systems which are interdependent. Yes, so we have all these interdependencies in the networks of complex systems. So the world is a network of interdependent networks, which is exactly what this book is also saying. And there are many aspects and many niches which we can dig into. And how can we do that? There is a science, luckily, called the science of networks. And Lotzi Barabash, who is a compatriot from Romania, he wrote many books. He also wrote Linked, the New Science of Networks, which is not new at all. But of course, they called it ironically new because in academia, we're not allowed to actually even talk about complex systems modeled as networks. It's only at the Santa Fe Institute and the more eclectic places where we are allowed to think in those terms. He also discovered patterns in networks, and in this book, Burst, it's a really, I recommend it to your readers. So what we can do with such networks? they enable us to look at the planet as a system and to see how much we can put its survivability limit, for example. Yes, in our infinite growth obligation. So we reached planetary boundaries already. But now, if you'd allow me, because many people may ask, okay, so what are these and how can we extract information from these complex networks? So the science of networks, I will just give you the 101s in 2 minutes, the science of networks. Yes. So we talk about network function, which is relating a network topology, which is determined by the number of nodes and links and how they are interconnected. And this is also related, I hope I can, okay, yes. For example, resilience is a network property, which can be determined by, let's say, we can find the weakest link in the network that would collapse first, and then we determine a vulnerability in the network, and then we can determine a degree of resilience of that network. And this can be for transportation. Here in the US this morning, I saw a post about a bridge which is ready to collapse. And on this bridge, there was a train carrying very bad material that if it would collapse in the river, the water for those people would be undrinkable. So there are all these issues that we can determine ahead of time with the science of networks. And this is done through concepts like flows, as well as cascading failures, for example, and critical hubs and other concepts. It is quite a bit, it is our full courses. But the idea is that you can relate the topology of a network with the dynamics, which is given by the flow. Yes. So how does the flow affect structural change, and how does this affect the network properties? And network properties is what I mentioned to you. So then you can map all these properties in a matrix, which is a connectivity matrix, the links between the nodes. And then you can extract from that matrix with mathematical processing, the kind of, for example, how much resource you can exchange across links, but also where is this, we call it weakest link. So in order to control a network, yes, you need to use these concepts and the matrix. The connectivity matrix is the most important thing. So long story short, yes, you can calculate the robustness of a network, but you also can find ways to put barriers against cascading failures. So this is always observed in biology, for example, where there are these complex regulatory networks that control biological systems, and they actually are self-organizing networks that keep us healthy. They produce immunity, for example. Anyway, long story short, I finished my 101 on network, but just I hope you just get an idea. So you have these matrix calculations, but then you can determine very important properties. What is more important is that the whole world, yes, this system of systems, of course, there are global risks. And at the World Economic Forum, I am working with a group which is every year determining the so-called global risk report. And the global risks are many. But what is interesting, so you can see here some which are like under investment in infrastructure, for example, which I mentioned about the bridge, yes, which is kind of critical infrastructure, and then of course the many other climate.
All sorts of. I mean, I'm always, when I look at the WEF risks every year, I see when more risks are climate related or politically related and so on. But
exactly.
I assume
so here are the climate and then the technology also, nanotechnology and so on, and data and so on. There are many of them, but I just underline the ones which are right now, yes, and obviously war, that's even not there, of course. Yes. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that also these risks are interdependent. So it is not easy to point to, okay, what is the cause of climate change? There are interdependencies and there are feedback loops. And for example, because of the warming of the Earth, the ice at the poles is collapsing, and that is actually very bad because the radiation from the sun is usually deflected by the ice. But now, because the ice has melted, it is absorbed by the oceans. The same radiation is not deflected anymore, and the oceans warm up faster, which is leading to the rest of the ice, of course, melting faster. So these are effects that, for example, the forest fires. We had huge forest fires, and they brought a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is actually going to stay there for 30 years. And that's a problem, yes? And that is also leading to the melting of the ice, which propagates even more the issue of sun deflection. So there are all these cascading failures and all these risks which are interdependent. And we can study with the science of networks which are the weakest links, the vulnerabilities, which are the risks which are biggest, and where do we have to take action as fast as possible. So now let's come to holistic decision making. Yes? So I've been working on
are we in the metaverse here, Mihaela?
Exactly. Now we are in the metaverse. As you know, I'm a technologist, a technology alchemist, and I like very much to play with technology. And I've been working with the Department of Defense and with emergency responders, because this is actually obviously the biggest application of holistic decision making. When you have an unexpected crisis, like for example, and now this is so close to Greece, you know, and we were talking about
earthquake,
like an earthquake, for example, right?
Yeah.
So how do you actually respond quickly? Because this is totally unexpected. Yes, you can anticipate that it will happen. Yeah, because you know the geography of the Earth, you know the tectonic plate is there, and the movement of the Earth will make it happen at one point. But you never know exactly when. And so what we can do is, with this science of networks, we can respond as fast as possible when it happens, and we can have this holistic situational awareness decision-making room in which you get information from everywhere. This is also I do not want to say anything to minimize the importance, but this, I mean, earthquakes, at least they happen in one place usually, as they can be coupled many times with tsunamis and other things. So that is when you need a holistic situational awareness room. But in the case, for example, of a terrorist attack, like let's say if you have a ship which appears, but it's not, you did not expect it there, and it's not allowed to be in your port, and then some smoke comes out of the ship, so you do not know, is this a terrorist attack or not? So that's when these holistic situational awareness rooms are very useful, and then you are going to bring together several agencies and so on and so forth. So I worked on such projects, and I modeled such situations, for example, yes, in a port and so on and so forth, related to various events, for example, like the Vancouver Olympics or other events which you want to actually set up a situational awareness of the whole place, yes, where if something happens, to respond quickly. And with such simulations and holistic situational awareness and decision making, you can point to the weakest links. Like, for example, in this case, there was a policy, yes, which was ineffective. For example, one of the biggest fire extinguisher, which is called the fire tag, was in the hands of the federal government and not in the hands of the local town when they did. So until they got the approval through the bureaucratic processes, and of course, that is also a big conundrum with the hierarchical bureaucratic processes, then the explosion escalated, and this could have been actually avoided if that fire tag was in the hands of the city. So such things you can detect with the science of networks, and that's what I mean by this kind of
holistic.
Let me give you another example, which is very dear to me and is related to, of course, climate and so-called citizen science. So this is a project, which is a blockchain project on Cardano, started by Sean Lynch, and it's called Open Litter Map. So what, maybe your listeners accustomed with Pokemon Go. Yeah, so it's like a Pokemon Go in which you go and find garbage and then you photograph. I found it here, and you tag it with location. So doing that, it enables a map, yes, which is again a holistic decision-making map, which enables you to know if there is enough garbage in a place to summon what I call the cleaning mob to on a weekend to actually do, yes, voluntary work to clean the planet. And this is because I was speaking about the centralized hierarchies and control. This is exactly the opposite. It's the bottom up. Yeah, what Otto Scharmer calls in this book awareness-based collective action. So that is what we can do with technology, and of course, decision making to engage people as well as to have this holistic map of what is happening. I hope I answered your question. It's a hard question, like always.
I mean, this to me, your last example is a glimpse into what Web3 and these technologies can enable digital communities that have common, if you want, interests, and each of us can belong to many of these digital communities and take actions and have purposes.
Yes, and exactly this, what you refer to as platforms. So there are platforms and platforms. So this platform, the Open Litter Map, is a platform of engagement of the people and the citizens, yes, and also it gives them this collective awareness, right? Oh, look how much garbage is here. Let's get out and get rid of it, or it's polluting the water, this and that. And then also the government can have an idea of, oh, in our country this is happening, so let's put some money from the taxpayers and do some serious cleaning here. So yeah, so these are the kind of platforms which we want, not those which are preying on us.
Yeah. You would say on one hand that we need a whole generation of these social, if you want, platforms, not in the sense of social media, in the sense that they are networks, digital networks with a purpose to improve life in a holistic sense. It can be garbage, it can be anything for that matter, and it can bring inspiration and connectivity to people with a purposeful way, not with the way, oh, I have so many likes and I have so many followers on Instagram and so on, right?
Because that's a problem with the social networks. I do not know. I think I have, if you want, I can share some more. I have actually, let's see if it works. Because I do not know. Probably it doesn't. I'm gonna stop sharing. So let me see. Because I have somewhere else. Let me find it. It's important, I think, to show. Because there is also a lot of work on these social networks, and they are really, that's a big problem. And that is the problem which we have with technology. So, okay, let's try now. Okay. And this is the biggest problem of social networks. Yes, that I'm trying to find you now. Here you are on Zoom. Okay, let's share this. So what you see here is the main problem with social networks. Yes, so we feel that we are together. Yes, we are together, but actually our culture is being hijacked. And how and what do I mean by this? There is a wonderful book by Chris Nodder, which I strongly recommend. It is called Evil by Design. So what these platforms actually do, when you mention the likes and so they practically prey on our pride. Oh, I don't have enough likes, I'm insecure. Oh, But they play, yes, on all these things, anger, envy. Oh, if he has more likes than me, oh no, I'm so unhappy. So they are manipulating us instead of engaging us to do good things. And why? Because the platform owners make more money from advertisements. This advertisement model is really a poison. Because if we act in a certain way, and Buckminster Fuller mentioned, he was so smart, and he said, you cannot change how people think. What you can do is you can give them a tool, which when they use, which will change their thinking. And this is, we have to change people's, we have to change the social platforms because they are the tool, yes. They are either putting us on this gluttony, pride, anger spiral, let's call it downward spiral, or they can put us on a higher spiral in which, oh, I'm engaged to do good for the others and for the planet. So yeah, this is a really, really big issue with the platforms.
It is a big issue, which, I mean, I guess this is, the others have talked about it as the surveillance capitalism. There's different angles to look at what has happened with the power of all these big tech companies and social media. But you also talk about the World Economic Forum meta crisis. Can you please tell our audience what you mean when you refer to that? Are you referring to the failure of major institutions, agencies, and so on? Or what are you referring to?
There are several dimensions to this, so there are really, really several dimensions. What we see, so when I call it meta crisis, is when I showed you that image about the Earth with everything interconnected and the interdependent risks. That's what we call meta crisis. The fact that it's a crisis of crisis, which you cannot point to the cause for one of them because they are all so interrelated, as I explained to you with that climate and the North Pole and the ice and the CO2 and all these interdependent things, that you cannot point to the cause. So it is a wicked problem. What we see are the symptoms, and the symptoms are so well described again in this book, yes, by Otto Scharmer, who says that our health systems are sick. Our food systems are actually poisoning us instead of nurturing us. Our education systems are incapable to learn. And our financial system is just getting ready for the next crash. Unfortunately, yes, he wrote this book longer time ago. But
are you hanging out with Rubini or what?
Definitely, he wrote this mega threats now. His new book.
And yeah, I haven't read it yet, but
He made a presentation at the World Economic Forum at the Green Accelerator, where I was immediately I followed after him with a panel on ESG. And he was just so amazing. It was such a good introduction to my panel because he is such a great BS detector. He has such a great BS detector, bullshit detector, if I may be direct. And that made an excellent introduction to what I wanted to point to the greenwash and so on and so forth. So to address, I can maybe get a summary of what we need to do with regard to today's economy. The only way, yes, oh, I do not know what happened. I'm sorry. so I was on another slide, and it just brought me back to this. So here, I wanted to show you this because what we need actually from where we are, we need to reset the economy. Yeah. So today our values are measured in purchasing power, right? I mean, we became consumers. That's how the advertising model of the current platforms is making us act and think as Buckminster Fuller mentioned. So those are the tools which we are using and we are indulging in. Like, you know, I always make this. It's like, okay, so the little animals in mud. Oh, that's so nice on my back. Yeah, so I'm indulging in that. I'm not striving, just indulging. So the problem is, yes, that we do not like to see the outputs of our consumption. We want to see only the ribbon boxed inputs on a beautiful plate. Oh, I have a new car which is consuming so much gas. I just need the supreme gas, you know, and I have this, whatever else. So what we need is to change our values, and we need those platforms that are helping us to change the values. And that is why I like so much blockchain, because it is a platform that is actually, you cannot cheat on it. Yes, it just reveals the truth because of its transparency. There is another thing that evolution didn't bring us to human flourishing, unfortunately. Yes, evolution is based on natural selection and the law of the strongest. So talking about equality, talking about inclusivity, these are not things which are absolutely inherent in how we have evolved.
They don't come natural to us. They haven't
They
been
definitely
instilled.
don't come natural. And I
No.
have, if
Yeah,
I,
but that
I
has to
just
do with
wanted to
education and culture and all sorts of other factors, right?
exactly. And I have, I even do not know if I will find it here. Yes, I have here, I found it. I hope you will be able to see it. So this is called spiral dynamics. This is again work which was done by Claire Graves and of course later the integral philosophers also. But so this is the evolution of us and as individuals, right? So where we are, and I'm going to use my glasses here because this is really. So we were talking about this safety and security, survival, satisfaction of primary needs. This is what the networks, the social networks of today are catering to. Yes, like, okay, do I have enough food? Do I have, but then there's also the willpower and action and passion. So they are like, okay, I have more money than, like, just imagining, yeah, even the rich people now. Oh, it's a fight between Bezos and Elon Musk. Who is richer? And you see those headlines. It's like, who cares? I mean, I want to see headlines about the. Okay, so look how many people did I bring into the financial system, or did I?
Yeah. I mean, Mihaela, my children 10 years ago were singing, you know, that song that was a hit, "I Want to Be a Billionaire," on the cover of Forbes magazine. I mean,
Exactly.
it's like,
that is the goal. That is the purpose
I
of
mean,
life.
that song says it all,
Exactly.
right?
And look where it brought us. It brought us at this, so it is related to this. Yes, this book by Neil Ferguson, who both of us met in Davos. It's called Doom, the Politics of Catastrophe. And this is very much related to the values of today and how actually this politics of catastrophe is based on fear and on lies and so on and so forth. So I recommend it to your audience.
Yeah,
But anyway,
and we must say, I mean, fear on a spiritual level is the exact opposite of love, not in the sense of human love, in the sense of divine love. So the more that we are kept in fear, the worse off we are in terms of our humanity and our ability to act collectively.
Totally.
There is no doubt about that. I mean, you know, you are a scientist, and you gave us a glimpse of frameworks that can help us think in ways that will serve us much better as humanity going forward, versus the ways that we've deployed that have been fragmented, right? And
Correct. And this is the big, David Bohm, who is was a theoretical physicist, one of the greatest, yes. And he had a very interesting, because he kind of turned into a philosopher.
Well, Mihaela, I read him, you know, in my early 30s as a philosopher. It was like, you know, I picked David Bohm before Deepak Chopra and so on. And
exactly.
yeah, it's just amazing.
So what my point is, what he said was that we are one, and he proved this in quantum physics. I just wanted to point to a book which I'm reading right now, and it's a new book, 2023, called The One, which is written by another theoretical physicist, Heinrich Fast, who actually gives a history of physics, and he talks about David Bohm as well. And the point I wanted to make about David Bohm is that in a conversation which he had with Krishnamurti, speaking of, yeah, I just mentioned Deepak Chopra, he was in conversation, and this, it was like a series called The Ending of Time, which I have a book of. Yes, I also, it was later on published, and they concluded that the biggest problem of today is fragmented consciousness, exactly as you mentioned right now. So it is this fragmentation, us versus them. That's why we are electing the wrong people. That's why we are we have got where we got. So I have a few things. I do not know if we still have time, but I would like to share. You know, there are a few major shifts that, and I only am summing up three here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, you know, so we if we can manage to do this shift, yes, so like the first one is related to us versus them and the fragmented consciousness, because this is also a fragmentation, not only between us and the fellow humans. Oh, Effie has more likes than me. So
Yeah.
versus, oh, Effie has many likes, that's amazing, so let's work with her and we all together can have even more. So we look at that, at nature as well, as like it's our enemy. So let's spray on it. Let's let's use the wood. Let's use the resources until they are not there anymore. And then the earth is heating, and all this catastrophe, chain catastrophe is happening. So from resources, yes, which we regarded nature as a commodity, and Polanyi actually got the Nobel Prize for postulating that nature is not a commodity, that nature is not capital, that we are part of nature, and actually we should play together with nature, as I mentioned to you before, and that's circular economy and ecosystem restoration. These are the shifts which we need, and I'm going to show you just an example now. This is very recent, and it is from Daniel Val. He is doing work in Europe, yes, and the European Union now has a project in which they want to do the right policies, but working together and starting with the land managers who can actually tell you the right way in which you can regenerate land. So they start with the cell, yes, and then they set the policies in collaboration with them, not just by hand waving and doing the policies like in the example which I gave you, which led to that catastrophe with the fire tag, yes, and the explosion because of the bureaucracy and because the right resource was not in the right hands. And of course, you have to go through, for example, the national legislators and the land managers are going to elect the right legislators because they know. And if we do a culture of regeneration, in which we look at nature as and that humanity as an integral part of nature, and that is another way to look holistically at things, then we will do much better. Another big shift, which I know you and especially your listeners are very interested in, and we met with Neil Ferguson, yes, in Davos, is money from speculative, extracted, exclusive to intentional, inclusive, which renews the social commons. And what is social commons? I have, another favorite book of mine, which is Think Like a Commoner by David Bollier, who was the co-author and participant in our project, from which resulted in the book From Bitcoin to Burning Man and Beyond, where I have a chapter as well on organic governance. So how can we actually use money to renew the social commons? So Neil Ferguson, as you know, he mentioned in Davos, yes, that we can disrupt this economic inequality landscape, and that blockchain is the best ever instantiation that we can have to date of the trust relationship between debtor and creditor. Given that ultimately, as Neil Ferguson also postulates in The Ascent of Money in his book, the value of money is a measure of trust. So that's why blockchain is so critical. As I mentioned, it is so critical because it changes our relationship with each other. It's like called a trustless system because you do not need, I know, no one need to trust you because everything is done through a smart contract on blockchain. So programmable money are a really, really, really great way towards regenerative finance. And if we set the policy right, yes, taxing resources instead of labor, for example, we can achieve the ideal of the circular currencies and the true digital factory of circular economies. So we can indeed create that inclusiveness, inclusive financial system. And, I mentioned patterns before. So this is an important thing, again, to mention blockchain, which, it's kind of, I'm as much in love with it as Neil Ferguson is, so, or maybe more. So there are patterns, yes, by which the distributed ledger enables a better financial system by bringing about privacy, consent, lower transaction costs. So it actually eliminates the friction, access to credit and social security relief, and increased functionality. And I think we spoke about the third one, which is the third shift, which is the technology from the monopoly power abuse, which now the social networks have as a centralized social networks, as I mentioned before, to empowering this accountable participation, as I mentioned with that example with the open litter map and engaging people to do the right things through those platforms for holistic decision making.
Mihaela, I mean, we could have another 2 or 3 hours discussion as these topics
as always.
Yeah, and I think what's more important is to move people and give them hope that there are people that are working with this vision, and it will happen. And as we are one, each of us can change the world. So I think, I want to sort of, despite all the problems that we have, the wicked problems, the interconnected problems, I think there's enough that is gathering steam, enough people that we attract, that we can start changing the world step by step together. And I really believe in what we mentioned briefly in the beginning of no more fragmentation in our education, in the way we live and so on. It's not like, oh, I'm a scientist and you're a philosopher, or you are an academic and you are a salesperson or whatever. We are all everything, and we have to bring that holistic approach to everything. I mean, you are one of the best examples of a scientist that brings the philosophical and spiritual part to what you do, which is highly technical, right?
Correct. And because you mentioned this, I just want to underline that there are actually, and if you allow me just once more to share my screen, because you are just provoking me so much. So, so there is this amazing, and again, yes, I wanted to get to the slide because I was looking at it, but I didn't get to it. So there is this amazing scientist that is called Ernesto van Weber. I hope your audience is going to look for him, and he has come up with some amazing principles of of this collaboration. So how he calls them principles of regenerative vitality, and actually he has ideas on how to use DAOs and blockchain to engage people in such regenerative vital communities, right? So like you have to view wealth holistically, as I was mentioning those likes. Let's join forces and get more likes together. And holistically means also together with nature, not against nature, not as conquerors of nature. Just be in right relationship with nature and with each other. Innovative, adaptive, responsive, empowered participation, which also blockchain enables. Then, of course, honor community and place. Do you think this is happening on Twitter? Are people on Twitter honoring the Twitter community? From what I see, that's why, I never joined, but I see it, my children, it's just like, it's hell there to cite someone else. So honor community and place, yes, and then all these principles, they are actually kind of very similar to the principles of open source, which stand as the foundation of the internet and which we believed in when the internet appeared. Yes, because I am old enough to know when the world before internet and after internet. And when the internet came, we all were thinking, oh my, now we're going to bring everybody together and make the world better. However, this didn't happen. But now we can make it. Yes, we can do this. And if I could, but probably I cannot move my slide somehow for some reason. I would have shown you one more, yes, instance of this empowered participation. So what our friend, at least my friend, I hope it will be yours too. So he suggested, as I mentioned, this DAO system. And the idea is that you can create communities and look at communities as a system and embed certain principles which are also in this book, think like a communal. So we worked with him in our project. So we have a project in Cardano called Project Catalyst. This is a community project that it's actually a governance project. Yes, so on creating a DAO like this, where people come together to decide what projects should be funded, and these are all projects which are for good. Yes, so okay. And they are actually working on this kind of DAO with trusted identities, tokens of trust, by which they reward, yes, people who are trustworthy and who honor the community. Proof of merit. So, for example, experts are rewarded with those tokens. Proof of knowledge. People who know, yes, the wise ones are rewarded with those tokens, and so on and so forth. So you can see community as a system in this way. So we have many projects. If we have time, I would be happy to tell you about them, but probably at another.
But Mihaela, you gave us such a window into what is possible and the good things that are possible in a very holistic way. It's amazing. You filled our heart with hope and goodness in a holistic sense. Not good for me to solve my problem, for my community, for my country, and so on, but in a much broader way. So I can't thank you, because this is really very, very inspiring. And before we close, I know that you have a dream for what the topic of the World Economic Forum should be next year instead of the one that was this year, right? Which was a collaboration in a fragmented world. What would you want it to be next year?
Humanity thriving in harmony with nature.
Oh, you're amazing. And really, when you say that, it sounds to me like a poem, really. And I know that you've even written poems, and I don't know if you still write poems, But tell us about that before we close. And of course, we'll share with our audience all the links to what you mentioned.
Yes, and I will send you a link. I have some of my poems also online. Not many, but you know, I got several awards for my poetry in many languages, so those poems are online. And I just want to say that I've been thinking this morning about one. Probably I will not remember it, but I remember the beginning. So when 9/11 happened, I wrote a poem, and it was called Self-Portrait in an Age of Fear. And it started like that. I am the whole in the part. I am that part which lost the whole. Didn't you notice that jumping from a world to another, you also lost the whole? Now run. Sarcastic clown reality is all that remained. Something like that. In any case, thinking about this holistic and holistic thinking today, and because I'm reading this book, The One, I remember that poem. And it's indeed, I think sometimes poetry is the only way in which we can express how it feels to live in today's meta crisis ridden world, but also a way of inspiration for us and a drive to make the world better. And this is what I'm doing with technology. And I can send you, of course, some links to, I have several articles, including on LinkedIn, about how to use technology for good, blockchain for the SDGs, and so on and so forth. So I will send you links because we don't have time unless you allow me to
Mihaela, I mean, you also just brought to mind that what you're really living and you know, walking the talk is really, you've got connected your mind with your heart. That is really what is going on, and that is why you're able to bring these together and see that the value is only in the interconnectedness and in the interplay, and you can write poems that move us all, and yourself, of course.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's like, you know how it is. It's like a bug. I cannot not write, and if I write it, then I feel much better. It's like a relief. I just put it on paper.
It's
any
music.
emotion I have. So
yeah. Thank you very much, Mihaela, for being with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to talk to you.